The great hall of the Alpha King's palace was a place where silence and power danced together. Light from tall, arched windows barely touched the polished stone floors, and shadows clung to the corners like secrets waiting to be heard. Nobles, advisors, and warriors filled the long benches, their eyes sharp and judging, waiting for the ceremony to begin. At the far end, the Alpha King sat upon his throne, tall and commanding, with a presence that seemed to bend the air around him. His gaze, cool and unreadable, swept the hall like a blade. Kale, human envoy from a distant kingdom, stood at the edge of the hall. He had been warned of the Alpha King's reputation, a ruler both revered and feared, one whose judgments shaped the fate of many lands. Kale's heart raced. He adjusted the sleeves of his tunic, straightened his shoulders, and reminded himself of his purpose. He was here to negotiate, to learn, and perhaps, if fortune favored him, to leave a mark that would not be forgotten. As he stepped forward, a soft sound reached his ears, a whimper, a shuffle, a tiny urgent movement. Out of the shadows, a silver-eyed pup appeared, its fur shimmering like moonlight caught in a stream. It circled Kale, sniffing his hands and the hem of his cloak, its movements cautious but curious. The hall's occupants whispered among themselves. Few had seen the pup up close. It was said to be the Alpha King's companion, a creature bound to him by ancient magic. Kale knelt slightly, extending a hand toward the pup. "Easy there," he murmured, voice calm, steady. The pup's ears twitched, and it sniffed his fingers. Then, almost without warning, the small creature bit his sleeve, not harshly, but sharply enough to startle him. The hall fell silent. A tension, thick as iron, gripped the room. Every noble and guard turned their gaze to Kale, waiting for his reaction. Some expected a cry of fear, others imagined a scolding, but Kale only smiled, tugging gently at the pup's mouth to release his sleeve. "And who says I'll let you have it so easily?" he said, his tone light, almost teasing. The Alpha King rose from his throne, his movement smooth and silent, like a shadow sliding across stone. His piercing gaze fixed on Kale, eyes narrowing with curiosity. The pup looked between them, sensing the shift in the air. It whined softly, circling closer to the king. Yet its eyes never left Kale. "You do not fear me," the Alpha King said, voice deep and calm, carrying both authority and intrigue. The words were simple, but they carried weight that pressed against Kale's chest. "I am cautious," Kale replied evenly, meeting the king's gaze without lowering his own. "But fear is not the only way to respond." A faint smile tugged at the corner of the Alpha King's lips, though he quickly masked it. Silence fell again, this one filled not with waiting but with anticipation, like the moment before the first drop of rain hits parched earth. The pup barked softly, almost in agreement with Kale, for patting back a step and sitting, tail curling around its paws. Whispers ran through the hall. Some admired Kale's composure. Others frowned, seeing boldness where they expected submission. The Alpha King, however, remained still, studying the human. His mind was a storm of thoughts, a mixture of curiosity and something he could not name. Few had ever met his gaze without faltering. Fewer still had inspired the spark that Kale now had ignited. "You will stay in the palace tonight," the Alpha King said finally. His words were both command and invitation, and they carried a subtle weight that left no room for refusal. "You will learn our ways, and perhaps you will understand the balance that keeps this kingdom from tearing itself apart." Kale nodded, keeping his composure. He felt a strange thrill at the command, not because of fear, but because of the weight of trust or, perhaps, challenge hidden in the king's voice. Servants guided Kale through twisting corridors lit by flickering torches. The pup trotted alongside him, its eyes never leaving his face, as if assessing every step he took. Kale glanced at the creature, unsure if he should feel wary or honored. "You're protective," he said softly, kneeling to meet its gaze. The pup blinked slowly, then nudged his hand with its nose. At night, Kale was led to a guest chamber with tall windows overlooking the darkened gardens of the palace. The moonlight spilled across the floor, silver and cold, illuminating a world both beautiful and mysterious. Kale sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting in his lap, listening to the distant howl of wolves in the forest beyond. The sound was not threatening. It was a reminder of the wildness just beyond the palace walls, a reminder of the king's power and reach. Before he could settle, a soft sound drew his attention. The pup padded into the room, curling at the foot of his bed. Kale reached down, brushing a hand along its fur, marveling at how warm and soft it felt, despite its wolfish eyes. "We're allies for now," he whispered, unsure if the words were for the creature or for himself. In the quiet of the night, Kale reflected on the strange events of the day. The hall's silence, the pup's boldness, and the Alpha King's penetrating gaze left him unsettled but fascinated. There was power here, yes, but also restraint, loyalty, and perhaps something even deeper, something he could not yet name. The next morning, Kale awoke to the faint light of dawn spilling through the windows. Outside, the palace stirred, a mixture of servants, guards, and nobles, beginning the day's rituals. He dressed quickly, aware that the first meeting with the Alpha King would define his place in this kingdom. When he entered the hall again, the atmosphere had shifted. The courtiers were murmuring, more attentive than before. The Alpha King sat on his throne, the pup at his side, silver eyes alert and unblinking. The king's gaze met Kale's, and a subtle tension passed between them, a silent agreement. Unspoken but understood, "You surprised me yesterday," the king said, voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "Few have such courage, or such curiosity." Kale bowed slightly. "Curiosity is often the first step toward understanding," he replied. He kept his voice steady, though his heart thumped in his chest. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed, as if weighing every word, every movement, every heartbeat. A herald announced the beginning of a new ritual, one Kale had only read about in texts, but never witnessed. The king's court gathered in a circle, and Kale found himself at the center, feeling the weight of every gaze upon him. The pup remained at his side, nuzzling his hand with a familiarity that was both comforting and strange. As the ceremony progressed, Kale realized that the Alpha King's power was not only in his command over men and beasts, but also in the subtle way he moved, spoke, and even breathed. Every gesture held authority. Every glance held judgment, and yet, beneath it all, there was a hint of something softer, something that only Kale seemed able to perceive. The ritual ended, leaving Kale standing alone for a moment while the courtiers whispered among themselves. The pup barked softly, breaking the tension, then nudged Kale toward the king. The Alpha King's eyes met his once more, and for the briefest moment, something like approval passed between them. "You are not like the others," the king said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "And perhaps that is why the pup chose you." Kale blinked, unsure how to respond. The words carried weight beyond their meaning, a subtle promise or warning he could not yet decipher. The pup wagged its tail, as if confirming the king's statement, and Kale could not help but smile, a mixture of relief and anticipation swelling in his chest. The day ended with Kale escorted back to his chamber, the pup following closely. Outside, the first stars appeared in the night sky, shining like tiny points of destiny. Kale felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar, curiosity, wonder, and perhaps the faintest hint of connection that stretched beyond the walls of the palace, beyond the shadows, and into the unknown as he lay down. The pup curled beside him, and Kale whispered softly, "Whatever this is, we will face it together." Outside the window, the howl of the wolves echoed once more, carrying the promise of a future filled with challenges, secrets, and the strange, unspoken bond between a human, a pup, and the Alpha King. The hall had fallen silent once, but now Kale realized it was only the beginning. The moon hung low over the kingdom, silver and bright, casting long shadows across the forest that bordered the Alpha King's palace. The trees were tall, ancient, and twisted, their branches tangled like the threads of a story too old to remember. Kale followed closely behind the Alpha King in his court, the chill of night brushing against his skin. His heart raced not with fear, but with the thrill of the unknown. "You are certain you can keep up?" the Alpha King asked, voice low and steady, carrying the weight of command. His eyes glinted under the moonlight, sharp as a blade. The pup trotted beside Kale, ears alert, eyes glowing faintly, as if it understood the forest better than any map. Kale nodded. "I have traveled far, Your Majesty. I am not easily lost." The king's lips twitched in a near smile, though it never fully reached his eyes. "We shall see," he said, and with a flick of his hand, the hunt began. The forest was alive with whispers. The wind stirred the branches, and the leaves rustled with secrets. Shadows shifted unnaturally, as though the night itself had a heartbeat. Kale moved cautiously, following the Alpha King through narrow paths and across streams that glinted like liquid silver. The pup darted ahead and back, sniffing the air, nudging Kale when a root threatened to trip him, and growling softly when a dark shape flitted in the shadows. Kale's pulse quickened as he realized this was not merely a hunt for game. The forest tested him. Strange, flickering lights danced at the edges of his vision. Whispers, soft and almost musical, drifted through the trees. He felt the pull of something unseen, something ancient, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. "Do you feel it?" the Alpha King asked suddenly, his voice breaking the strange rhythm of the forest. The forest does not only test the body, it tests the mind. Kale glanced at him, heart steady despite the tension. "I feel a presence," he admitted. "Something watching us." The king nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Good. Awareness is survival. Confidence without caution is folly." He moved with a grace that made each step seem effortless, as if the forest itself parted for him. Kale struggled to keep pace, but the pup stayed by his side, a constant guide through the shifting shadows. Hours passed, though Kale could not tell by the light. The moon moved across the sky, casting strange silver patterns on the moss-covered ground. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees. Kale froze, sensing movement around him. The pup's ears flattened, and it stepped in front of him, hackles raised. From the shadows, a creature emerged. Its eyes burned with an unnatural glow, and its teeth gleamed under the moonlight. Kale's first instinct was to step back, but he held his ground, hands slightly raised, feeling the pull of something he could not explain. The Alpha King stepped forward, sword drawn. But Kale noticed a flicker of doubt cross his face, not at the danger, but at Kale's stance. The creature lunged. Kale braced himself, and the pup leaped, barking and snapping. But instead of retreating, Kale reached out. Hand extended and whispered, "I mean no harm." The creature halted, tilting its head as though confused by the human's calmness. The Alpha King watched silently, tension in his posture. Few had ever faced the creatures of this forest with courage, much less a sense of calm that bordered on understanding. The pup barked again, then ran around the creature, circling it with an ease Kale could not mimic. And then, almost miraculously, the creature backed away, slipping silently into the shadows from which it had emerged. Kale exhaled, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhilaration. The pup pressed against his leg, as if approving his bravery. The Alpha King's gaze lingered on him, unreadable but intense. "You are unusual," he said softly, almost a whisper, though Kale could feel the weight of it. Kale lowered his hand. "I only wish to survive and learn," he said honestly. "And perhaps to understand." They moved deeper into the forest, the tension now replaced by a careful respect. The Alpha King led the way, and Kale followed, trusting the pup to guide him when the paths became treacherous. Streams sparkled under the moonlight, stones slick with moss threatening to unbalance him. But Kale adapted quickly, relying on instinct as much as guidance. At the heart of the forest, they reached a clearing. The moonlight fell directly upon it, illuminating a circle of stones carved with runes that glowed faintly. Kale could feel the energy radiating from them, a strange mixture of danger and beauty. The Alpha King gestured for him to step forward. "This is a place of truth," the king said, voice steady, carrying authority and mystery. "Here all who enter are tested, not by strength alone, but by heart and courage. You have already proven part of yourself, Kale, but will you prove the rest?" Kale swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment. He looked at the pup, now sitting calmly beside him, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. The bond between them had grown stronger during the hunt, a silent understanding of trust and loyalty. Kale nodded to the king. "I am ready." The Alpha King's eyes softened, though just slightly, revealing a hint of something deeper beneath his stern exterior. He stepped back, allowing Kale to move forward into the center of the rune circle. The air hummed, vibrating with a strange energy that made the hairs on Kale's arms stand up. Shadows moved around him, flickering in shapes he could not fully comprehend. Kale closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on his breathing, on the calmness he had found despite the danger. The pup pressed its head against his leg, a grounding presence. Then, slowly, Kale opened his eyes, reaching out with both hands. Light surged around him, gentle but intense, and he felt the forest respond to him. Shifting subtly as though acknowledging his courage, the Alpha King watched silently, fascination clear in his gaze. Few humans could command even a fragment of this forest's ancient magic. Yet here was Kale, standing firm, calm, and aware, bridging a gap between worlds that few dared to cross. When the light dimmed, Kale looked around. The clearing was quiet again, serene, as if nothing had happened. The pup wagged its tail, nudging him with approval. Kale felt a thrill of accomplishment and an unexpected warmth of connection. Not only to the pup, but to the king who had watched silently, his thoughts hidden but not unfeeling. "You have done well," the Alpha King said finally, stepping closer. His presence was commanding, yet there was a subtle softness in his voice, a recognition of Kale's courage. "Few can face what you faced tonight and remain untouched by fear. You have earned something, though I cannot yet name it." Kale met his gaze, heart steady. "Then I will wait until it is revealed," he said, bowing slightly in respect. The Alpha King nodded, though the faintest shadow of a smile touched his lips. "Rest now." We return to the palace. There is more to learn, more to face, and tomorrow you will see that courage is only the first step toward understanding what lies beyond fear. The walk back was quieter than the hunt. Kale moved alongside the pup, feeling the connection deepen. The forest seemed less menacing now, more alive with secrets waiting to be discovered. The moon cast a gentle glow, and the stars shimmered overhead like distant eyes watching the unfolding story. When they returned to the palace, Kale was led to his chamber once more. The pup curled at the foot of his bed, eyes glowing softly in the dim torchlight. Kale knelt, brushing a hand along its silver fur. "We did well today," he whispered. Together, beside the window, the forest stretched endlessly, dark and mysterious. A world of magic and danger that Kale had only begun to understand. He felt a stir of anticipation, of something unknown yet deeply compelling. Tomorrow promised more challenges, more tests, and the unspoken possibility of a bond that could change everything for him. For the pup, and perhaps in time, for the Alpha King himself. As Kale lay down to sleep, the howl of wolves echoed from the distant forest, carrying a promise. The hunt was over for tonight, but the story had only just begun. The sun had barely risen when Kale was summoned to the inner sanctum of the Alpha King's palace. The hallways were narrower here, lined with tapestries that told stories of long-forgotten wars and triumphs, of kings and queens whose names were etched in gold, but whose faces seemed to watch him as he passed. Servants and guards gave way, bowing their heads in respect, of sensing the importance of the human who had earned the Alpha King's attention. Kale's pulse quickened. He had been honored to walk the palace halls before, but the inner sanctum was reserved for those closest to the king. Few outsiders had ever entered, and fewer still had returned unchanged. The pup trotted beside him, ears alert, silver eyes glimmering as if it knew secrets the walls themselves could not speak. The Alpha King stood waiting, his posture rigid yet natural, commanding the room without a word. Kale noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the slight narrowing of his eyes, as if he was measuring not only Kale's actions but his very thoughts. The pup circled Kale before settling at the king's feet, alert and watchful. "Kale," the Alpha King began, voice low and calm, carrying the authority of one who had seen centuries pass. "What you do not know will soon be revealed. But understand this knowledge is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a weight, and sometimes it is a choice. Kale bowed slightly. I am ready to bear it, Your Majesty. I came to learn, and I will face whatever comes. Flicker of something passed over the king's expression, approval, perhaps, or curiosity. He gestured to a heavy wooden door carved with ancient runes. Then follow me. The inner sanctum was unlike any place Kale had seen. The walls glowed faintly with magical inscriptions that pulsed like the heartbeat of the palace itself. Shelves held relics of old power, swords tempered in enchanted flames, scrolls that whispered when touched, and crystals that shimmered with a light of their own. The air was thick with the weight of history, of promises made and broken, secrets too dangerous for ordinary eyes. Kale felt both awe and a trace of fear. The pup padded close to him, brushing against his leg as if to remind him that he was not alone. The Alpha King's gaze never left him. Many have entered here seeking power, the king said, voice echoing slightly in the chamber. Few have understood what it truly means. You are different, Kale. You do not seek to dominate. You seek to understand. Kale's chest tightened. I wish to understand, not only your kingdom, but you, Your Majesty. Why it is so guarded and why it carries such weight. The Alpha King's eyes darkened, a shadow passing across his face. You tread dangerous ground. Curiosity is admirable, but it can awaken forces that even kings cannot control. He paused, studying Kale closely. There is something about you. Something that does not belong to this world entirely. It is no wonder the pup responded to you. Few can command even its attention. Kale's gaze fell to the pup, which sat obediently at the king's side, silver eyes glowing faintly. He reached down, brushing a hand along its fur. It trusts me, he said softly, and I trust it. The king inclined his head, but his expression remained unreadable. He motioned toward a pedestal at the center of the room. On it lay a scroll, bound in black leather and sealed with a symbol Kale had never seen. This is a fragment of the prophecy that has guided my house for centuries, the king said. It speaks of a human who will walk among us, whose courage and wisdom will decide the fate of our people. Kale hesitated, fingers hovering over the scroll. The pup nudged him gently, urging him forward. Taking a deep breath, Kale broke the seal and unrolled the parchment. The words shimmered as if alive, written in a script that moved and shifted with the light. He squinted, trying to read, and gradually, comprehension dawned. The prophecy spoke of a human who would enter the kingdom and change the course of destiny. It mentioned courage, heart, and the ability to see beyond fear. It also warned of danger of ancient curses, of power that could consume or corrupt, and of choices that carried consequences far beyond the individual. Kale's mind raced. The Alpha King's words, the pup's presence, the tests of the forest, all of it, began to fit together. This was no ordinary human's journey. He had been chosen, whether by fate, magic, or both. To walk a path few could survive. The Alpha King stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Kale. Few can bear the weight of this knowledge without faltering. And yet you have faced the forest and the creatures within, and you have not been broken. That is why you are here. Kale felt a mixture of pride and unease. He had not sought to be extraordinary. He had only sought to survive, to understand, to do what was right. And yet destiny had a way of pulling even the unwilling into its current. The pup let out a low growl, ears flattened, as if sensing a shift in the room's energy. Kale followed its gaze and saw a shadow move near the far wall, a dark presence, barely visible yet unmistakable. He felt a chill run down his spine. What is that? He whispered, not taking his eyes off the shadow. The Alpha King's expression hardened. A warning, he said quietly. There are forces here older than the throne, older than even my rule. They watch, they wait, and they will test you in ways that cannot always be predicted. Kale swallowed hard but stood his ground. Then I will face them, as I have faced everything else. The king nodded slowly, a mixture of respect and caution in his gaze. Good. Courage without wisdom is reckless. Courage with understanding. That can change the world. Kale turned back to the scroll, reading further. He discovered that the pup was not only a companion but also a guardian, bound by magic to both the king and the prophecy. Its role was to guide, to test, and to protect, ensuring that the chosen human could survive the challenges ahead. The realization deepened Kale's sense of responsibility. This was no longer a matter of personal survival. The fate of the kingdom man, perhaps something even greater, rested upon him. The pup nudged Kale's hand again, and he smiled faintly. "We will do this together," he whispered. The Alpha King's voice broke the moment. "You are not merely a guest in my halls, Kale. You are a participant in a story written long before your arrival, and your choices will echo far beyond these walls." Kale met the king's gaze, feeling the weight of his words. There was power here, yes, but also vulnerability, a truth that few could perceive. The king's strength was undeniable, yet there was a loneliness, a guardedness, that made Kale's presence both dangerous and vital. As the day passed, Kale was shown more of the inner sanctum, chambers filled with relics, libraries of forbidden knowledge, and artifacts that hummed with latent magic. Each discovery carried both wonder and warning. The pup remained at his side, a constant reminder of the bond he now shared with this place, with the king, and with the destiny he had unknowingly accepted. By evening, Kale had learned more than he could have imagined. He understood the weight of the prophecy, the danger lurking in the shadows, and the delicate balance of power within the kingdom. Yet there was also a growing connection and unspoken understanding between him and the Alpha King. Moments of quiet conversation, shared glances, and subtle gestures hinted at something deeper than duty or fear, a bond forged in trust and mutual recognition. As Kale prepared to leave the inner sanctum, Pup curled at his feet, ears alert. The Alpha King stepped closer, his expression unreadable, but his voice carried a weight Kale had not heard before. "Tonight, the forest and the halls have tested you. Tomorrow, the challenges will grow. Remember this: your courage and your heart are your greatest weapons. And yet, there is more to learn about power, about trust, and about the bond that ties you to this kingdom." Kale bowed respectfully, feeling the gravity of the moment. "I will not falter, Your Majesty." The Alpha King inclined his head, a faint shadow of a smile crossing his face. "We shall see, Kale. We shall see." Kale left the inner sanctum with the pup at his side, the weight of knowledge pressing gently on his shoulders. The palace was quiet now, the corridors dimly lit. Yet he could feel the hum of magic beneath the stones, the heartbeat of a kingdom that had watched and waited for centuries for someone like him. As he lay in his chamber that night, the pup curled beside him, Kale reflected on what he had learned. The prophecy, the forest, the challenges each had tested him. Each had revealed a piece of the truth he was meant to uncover. But the greatest revelation was the bond he now shared with the Alpha King, silent yet powerful, a connection that promised both danger and hope. The moon rose high, casting silver light across the palace walls. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the promise of trials yet to come. Kale closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of anticipation, courage, and a strange warmth he could not name. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more secrets, and the next step on a path that would test not only his strength, but the depth of his heart. And somewhere, in the shadows beyond the palace walls, unseen eyes watched, waiting. Sensing the stirring of destiny, the story was only beginning. The dawn broke with a pale light that barely touched the palace walls. Kale awoke to the soft rustle of the pup beside him, silver eyes gleaming as if aware of the day's unseen dangers. He stretched and dressed quickly, feeling the weight of the prophecy and the king's words pressing on him like a silent reminder. Today would be unlike any other. The Alpha King met him at the edge of the courtyard, cloak flowing behind him, eyes sharp as ever. "We leave at once," he said, voice calm but commanding. "The forest is stirred. Dark forces move within it, drawn by the energy you awakened. And it is not just the forest that tests us. There are those within the kingdom who would see us fail." Kale nodded, steadying his nerves. The forest had already tested his courage once, and the bond with the pup had given him strength. But now he realized the stakes were higher. This was no longer a simple test of bravery. It was a trial that could determine the fate of the Alpha King, the kingdom, and perhaps the prophecy itself. They entered the forest, the pup leading the way with sure steps, ears twitching at every sound. The trees were denser than before, their shadows forming shapes that seemed almost alive. Strange whispers drifted through the air, half-heard voices that teased the mind and threatened distraction. Cale's grip tightened on the strap of his satchel, where he kept scrolls and notes, though he knew knowledge alone would not save him. "You must focus," the Alpha King said, walking beside him. "Fear can blind you. Even courage without awareness can be your undoing." Cale nodded. "I understand," he said. "I will not falter." For hours they moved through the forest, navigating hidden paths and avoiding unnatural traps. Shadows shifted at the edges of vision, and Cale felt the presence of eyes watching, his creatures too quick and silent to be seen clearly. Yet the pup guided him through each challenge, sniffing, nudging, and growling when something dangerous drew near. Suddenly a low growl echoed, and a figure stepped from behind a tree. Its form was humanoid, yet twisted and dark, eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Cale froze, heart pounding, but the Alpha King did not waver. He stepped forward, sword in hand, aura of power radiating around him. "Do not move," the king commanded. His voice carried authority that bent the shadows back. Yet even he did not strike immediately. Cale felt a strange connection to the creature, an instinctive understanding that it was not merely hostile, but bound by forces older than himself or the king. He stepped forward slightly, hand raised. "I mean no harm," he said calmly. The pup barked sharply, standing between Cale and the shadow. Yet the creature did not attack. It lingered watching, as though testing him, waiting to see what he would do next. "You see," the Alpha King said quietly, almost to himself, "the courage tempered by understanding is rare. Few could face this being without drawing its wrath." Cale exhaled slowly. "Then we do what must be done, but with care." The creature let out a low hiss and vanished into the trees as suddenly as it had appeared. Cale's hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the awareness that he had glimpsed something beyond comprehension. The pup pressed against his leg, reassuring him. "Your bond with the pup strengthens you," the Alpha King said, walking beside him. "It is more than loyalty. It is instinct, trust, and magic intertwined. Few can command such a bond, even unknowingly." Cale glanced down at the silver-eyed companion. "I trust it, and I trust you," he said softly. The king's eyes flickered briefly, an unreadable emotion passing over his face. He said nothing, but Cale felt the weight of approval, tempered by caution. The forest seemed quieter now, yet the tension remained. The danger had not passed, had only shifted, moving unseen, like a predator stalking in silence. Hours later, they reached a clearing dominated by a stone altar, ancient and carved with runes that pulsed faintly. Cale's heart quickened. The pup sniffed the air, ears flat, growling softly. The Alpha King gestured for him to step forward. "This is a place of reflection and choice," the king said. "Here you confront not only danger, but your own heart. What you decide here will echo beyond the forest, beyond the walls of the palace." Cale stepped forward cautiously, feeling the energy radiating from the altar. He could sense the history embedded in the stones, the magic of those who had walked before him, the weight of the prophecy pressing down on his shoulders. The pup sat close, tail curled protectively around him. Cale's thoughts drifted to the Alpha King. Their bond had grown stronger over the past days, subtle yet undeniable. The king's presence was both intimidating and comforting, a paradox Cale struggled to understand. He realized he had begun to feel something deep: respect, trust, perhaps even a quiet admiration for the man who carried the weight of an entire kingdom with such controlled strength. "You have come far," the Alpha King said softly, voice carrying across the clearing. "But far is not enough. You must learn to balance courage with patience, trust with caution, and desire with duty. Only then can you survive what is to come." Cale nodded, absorbing the words. He felt the pup's warmth against his leg, grounding him, reminding him that he was not alone. Together, They had faced fear and uncertainty, and together they would face what lay ahead. The forest stirred suddenly, a rush of wind and shadows moving faster than the eye could follow. Cale's pulse quickened. The creatures of the forest were responding to their presence. Drawn by the energy he had awakened, testing them once more, the Alpha King's eyes narrowed. "Stay close," he commanded, sword drawn, aura of authority radiating around him. "Do not underestimate what lurks here. Some of it is sentient. Some of it is the forest itself." Cale followed, every sense alert. The pup darted ahead, ears twitching, eyes glowing with a faint magical light. They moved carefully, avoiding pitfalls and sudden traps. The forest testing their every step. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind them, and a shadow lunged. Cale reacted instinctively, stepping between the pup and the creature. The Alpha King moved with him, blades striking with precision. But Cale saw the look in the king's eyes: concern, awe, and something deeper, something unspoken. Cale held his ground, voice calm despite the danger. "We face this together," he said softly, almost to himself. The pup barked, circling the creature, keeping it at bay while Cale and the king advanced. The shadows seemed to hesitate, as though sensing the bond between human, pup, and king. Slowly, the creature retreated into the darkness, disappearing as silently as it had arrived. Cale exhaled, heart racing, but steady. The Alpha King lowered his sword, studying him closely. "Few humans would have acted as you did," he said quietly. "Most would have fled or faltered. Your courage is matched by wisdom, and that is rare." Cale bowed slightly, though his thoughts were racing. "I do not seek glory," he said. "I seek understanding, and I wish to protect what must be protected." The king's eyes softened ever so slightly. "Then you are beginning to learn," he said. "But this is only the beginning. The forest is alive, and it watches. It will not forget your presence, nor will it forgive mistakes easily." As they made their way back to the palace, the forest seemed calmer, though Cale knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The pup trotted close, silver eyes reflecting moonlight, a silent promise of loyalty and protection. Cale felt the bond between them deepen, understanding that trust and courage were intertwined in ways he had never imagined. Back in the palace, Cale was escorted to his chamber. He sat by the window, watching the forest beyond, aware that danger and intrigue were never far. The Alpha King's words echoed in his mind: courage, wisdom, balance, trust. The lessons were clear, yet their meaning would be tested in the days to come. The pup curled at his feet, and Cale reached down, brushing its silver fur. "We have done well," he whispered, "but there is more ahead, and whatever comes, we face it together." Sighed. The first stars of night appeared, twinkling like distant eyes watching the unfolding story. Cale felt a strange warmth, a sense of purpose and connection, growing stronger with each passing moment. The Alpha King's gaze lingered in his thoughts, a reminder that the bond they shared was more than duty or prophecy. It was becoming something deeper, something neither fully understood yet. And somewhere, beyond the palace walls and the forest, unseen forces stirred. The world was shifting, old powers awakening, and the next challenge loomed closer than ever. Cale knew that courage alone would not be enough. Understanding, trust, and the bonds he had forged with the pup and the king would be his true weapons. The night stretched on, quiet but alive, with promise and tension. Cale closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the forest, the prophecy, the bond he shared with the Alpha King. He was no longer simply a human envoy. He was part of a story older than himself, a story that would test every fiber of his being. And he was ready. The night was still, the palace bathed in silver light from the full moon. Cale stood at the edge of the courtyard, the pup at his side, ears twitching, eyes alert. Tonight was the night he had been preparing for, the culmination of the prophecy, the trials, and the lessons of the forest. He could feel the air thick with anticipation. As if the very stones of the palace were holding their breath, the Alpha King approached silently. Cloak flowing behind him, eyes fixed on Cale with a mix of command and concern. "The final test awaits," he said, voice low, but steady. It is not merely strength, or courage, or wisdom. It is all of them, and more. Your choices tonight will define the fate of this kingdom and, perhaps more than you can imagine. Kale nodded, determination steady in his chest. I am ready, Your Majesty. Whatever comes, I will face it. The king inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the resolve in Cal's voice. Together, they moved toward the forest, the pup leading, silver eyes gleaming faintly in the moonlight. The trees seemed alive, swaying as if welcoming them. Yet shadows lurked at every edge, watching. Waiting, they reached the ancient clearing at the heart of the forest, the one marked by the rune-covered stones. The altar glowed faintly, pulsing with energy that resonated in Kale's chest. The pup barked softly, circling the area, ears flat. Sensing something unseen, Kale stepped forward, the Alpha King beside him, blade drawn. The forest will test you, the king said quietly. It will reveal fears, temptations, and truths you may not wish to see. Stand firm, Kale. Trust in what you have learned and in what we share. The ground trembled beneath them, shadows coiling and twisting like living serpents. From the darkness emerged creatures of shadow and smoke, eyes glowing with a fierce intelligence. Kale's heart raced, but he did not falter. The pup growled, moving to his side, ready to defend him. The Alpha King advanced, blade cutting through the darkness with precision. Yet Kale noticed that the creatures did not flee immediately. They paused, as if recognizing something within him. Something that neither fear nor strength could fully define. Kale took a deep breath. Recalling the lessons of the forest, courage tempered with patience, trust coupled with awareness, and understanding that power alone could not overcome true challenge. He reached out with his hand, not in attack, but in connection. I mean no harm, he whispered. The shadows hesitated, then shifted, swirling around him. A voice echoed in the clearing, low and musical, yet tinged with menace. Human, why do you claim to understand what you do not? Why do you step into a power older than yourself? Kale did not retreat. I seek not to claim it, but to protect it. I seek to understand, and to do what is right. The creatures paused again, uncertainty in their movement. The pup pressed against Kale's leg, grounding him, lending strength and reassurance. The Alpha King's eyes met his, a silent acknowledgement that Kale's courage and heart were being tested as much as his own. Then the shadows began to shift, forming a single, towering figure, dark and radiant at once. It spoke, voice echoing like wind through the mountains. The bond you share, human, is the key. Without it, neither you nor the king can prevail. Prove your heart, prove your trust, or all will fall. Kale felt the weight of the moment. The pup's presence was no longer just comforting, it was essential. The bond they shared was intertwined with the magic of the forest, with the prophecy, with the fate of the kingdom. He knelt slightly, placing a hand on the pup's head. We face this together, he said softly. The figure loomed closer, shadows coiling around it, testing the truth of Kale's words. Then, in a surge of energy, the figure lunged, a dark wave of power that threatened to overwhelm him. Kale braced himself, grounding his thoughts, focusing on courage, understanding, and the bond with the pup. The Alpha King moved beside him, blade cutting through the wave, but even his strength alone was not enough. Kale stepped forward, raising his hand, and a soft light began to glow from the pup, spreading through him, through their bond, into the clearing. The shadows shrieked, twisting and writhing as the light expanded, not in force, but in harmony. The forest seemed to respond, the ground trembling and the stones glowing brighter. The shadow figure faltered, then dissolved into mist, leaving only silence in its wake. Kale's heart pounded, but he remained steady, the pup pressing against his leg as if sharing the triumph. The Alpha King lowered his blade, breathing heavily. His eyes met Kale's, and for the first time, his expression softened completely. You have done it, he said, voice a mixture of relief and awe. You have proven courage, wisdom, and trust. You have faced fear without faltering. You have fulfilled the prophecy. Kale exhaled, exhaustion and exhilaration mingling in equal measure. "It was never just me," he said softly. "The pup you. We did it together." The king stepped closer, placing a hand on Kale's shoulder, a rare gesture of intimacy and recognition. "Indeed," he said, "few humans could have done what you did. Few could have faced not only the forest, but the truth of themselves and their place in destiny." Kale looked up at him, seeing not just a king, but a man strong, commanding, yet capable of trust and connection. A warmth rose in his chest, a sense of belonging he had never known before. The bond between them, once tentative, now felt unbreakable. The pup barked softly, circling them once before settling at their feet. Its eyes glimmered, reflecting the light of the altar, as if acknowledging the completion of a journey. Kale knelt, brushing his hand over its fur. "We have done well," he whispered. The Alpha King watched, eyes distant for a moment, then returned to Kale. "The kingdom is safe for now," he said. "But the world is always changing. The forest, the prophecy, the forces that move unseen. They will not rest. Neither should we." Al nodded. "Then we remain vigilant." Together, silence settled over the clearing, filled with the quiet hum of magic and the whisper of leaves. Kale felt a sense of peace, tempered with awareness. The trials had tested him, shaped him, and revealed the depth of his courage and heart. Yet he also knew this was not the end. The bond with the Alpha King and the pup was now a guiding force, a light in the shadows that would help navigate whatever came next. The Alpha King's voice broke the silence. "There is one final lesson," he said softly, almost to himself. "True strength is not in vanquishing shadows, but in understanding them. In facing fear with trust, in choosing connection over isolation." Kale felt the truth of those words resonate within him. He had faced shadows, both literal and of the heart, and had emerged stronger. He had learned that courage alone was not enough, that wisdom, trust, and bonds of loyalty were just as vital. The Alpha King extended his hand. Kale hesitated for only a moment before taking it, feeling the warmth and strength in the king's grip. It was a gesture of respect, trust, and something unspoken, deeper than words could convey. The pup pressed against them, silent guardian and witness to the moment. The moonlight bathed them all in silver, forest quieting as if acknowledging the triumph. Kale knew the challenges would continue, the world beyond the palace walls still full of trials, dangers, and mysteries. Yet he also knew that he was no longer alone. He had allies, a bond that could withstand fear and darkness, and a purpose that transcended survival. The pup barked softly once, tail wagging, and Kale smiled. "Yes," he said, "we have succeeded. And yet, our journey is only beginning." The Alpha King's eyes met his, intense and unreadable, yet filled with something that Kale could not name trust. Admiration, perhaps even something deeper. He did not speak, only nodded, acknowledging the bond that had been forged through trials, danger, and courage. The forest whispered around them, carrying the promise of new adventures, new challenges, and the continuation of a story that had begun long before either of them had arrived. Kale felt a thrill of anticipation, knowing that the path ahead would be difficult, but also filled with wonder, connection, and the magic of destiny fulfilled. As dawn approached, light spilling over the trees, Kale stood with the Alpha King and the pup at his side, ready to face whatever came next. The prophecy had been fulfilled, yet its lessons would guide them forever. Courage, wisdom, and trust, the pillars of their bond, would remain unbroken. And for the first time, Kale felt a sense of belonging, of purpose, and of a connection that would endure through shadow and light. The journey was far from over, but Kale was ready. Together, they would face the world.